Hi, Ray Middleton here, System Broker at Mental Health Concern and Fulfilling Lives. Welcome to part 4 of 5 films introducing Pi. Hope you find this week's really helpful, interesting and useful. It's an interview with Victoria, Commissioner at Westminster City Council for a number of years around homelessness, rough sleeping services, and has been on the Pi journey for about a decade. So she's got loads of really good ideas to share on the journey of Pi about things you can introduce around those 5 different areas of the 5 or 6 of the Pi. And we've also got an interview with Sophie Boubis, who's our data analyst here at Fulfilling Lives. And she's got some great ideas to share about the evaluation side of Pi, about how to evaluate the changes that you make if you decide to go on the Pi journey. So I hope you enjoy this film this week, and there's one more next week where we'll one of the things we'll look at is have a tour of the pilink.net. Victoria's interview is available on that as a resource if you do sign up to that. And Victoria also suggests Jay Levy's book's really good. We interviewed Jay last week in part 3 of the Pi training, so that's a good connection. Hope you enjoy this week. Thank you.
So, hello, I'm Victoria Zvaden from the Rough Sleeping Commissioning team at Westminster, so I'm a Rough Sleeping Commissioning Manager. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Westminster services and my Pi journey. I'm going to tell you a bit about the literature that I found useful, the documents. Wow, that really helps my thinking. And in terms of telling you about the stuff we've done in Westminster, I thought let me divide it up in terms of the stuff that costs a lot, the stuff that costs a bit, and the stuff that's free as well. Because I think it's a mistake to think that Pi always costs money. It doesn't always cost money at all. So first of all, Westminster. Westminster, we've got the highest concentration of rough sleeping in the country. We commission a range of services from the outreach services on the street, day centres, hostels, supported housing. So a real pathway of services. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about thinking of Pi in terms of the whole system and the joins between the services as well. So my journey over the last 10 years. But the first thing I say to my services is, I'm not a knowledgeist, I'm not an expert. I'm as much on a journey as the rest of you. Or to be honest with you, some of our services are far more advanced than I am. We've got a number of hostel managers who are also psychotherapists on the side as well. But I kind of like to think we're all in it together, learning and sort of sharing knowledge with each other. I found the developments in the way personality disorder is viewed over the last 10 years as enormously helpful. And my first recommendation in terms of a brilliant guide is this. Meeting the Challenge, Making the Difference. It's available free from the Emergence website. I just think if every worker reads this, it's a great grounding in personality disorder. The history, the difficulty with the word, what helps, practical skills. So I really recommend that. I think that perspective is so critical, really. Sometimes we have guys that incredibly antisocial in and out of prison, but really seeing through that, seeing the traumatised, neglected child that they were, just makes all the difference in terms of perspective and how we can help people. And to me, with this whole Pi stuff, there's a real the imperative is. It might be Winnie the Pooh, it might be somebody else who said if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And we've got to change things up because we've got so many people that are just we help a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but we've also got revolving door people in and out of prison on the street in different hostels. Some of them are all our hostels. We've got to do things differently. Of course, it makes perfect sense to learn from their insights and the skills and the psychological disciplines. So there's a real imperative for me with this Pi work. So I'm going to tell you some of the stuff that we've done in Westminster. So I'll start with the cost a lot, I'll get through that quickly, we'll get on to the free stuff later. So we've been really lucky with capital funding to improve a number of our hostels and our day centres. And while you can run a great service in a not very good building, wow, the difference it makes to have great space as well. And I've really seen that. So we've been lucky with capital funding to improve physical spaces. But we were also very lucky, actually all the way about 7-8 years ago, to get some funding for CBT training for workers across our pathway. And so cognitive behavioural therapy skills for homelessness workers, outreach day centres and hostels. We did a batch of about 20. And we did that with Dr Nick Maguire from the University of Southampton. And two particular lessons I got from that were you really can measure this stuff. Dr Nick Maguire is very keen on evidencing impact, and we were really able to do that in terms of measures of staff, particularly things around staff resilience, how they felt about the work, how impactful they felt they could be, kind of burnout, that kind of thing. Actually, there were a range of measures, and it really kind of made the case for the difference that training made. And the second thing that I really got from that batch of training was the impact of clinical supervision, reflective practice, that kind of thing. That if you learn new skills, you need to practice them. You know, you can't just go on a one-day course. You've got to keep practicing and talking about it and trying it out, getting it wrong, trying it out, talking it through. But that reflective practice also has space for workers to talk about the impact of the work. It just really makes a difference. And because we gave workers from across the pathway, across organisations, a taster of that, what was brilliant is that they went back to their organisations and said, this is really important, and actually it's been mainstreamed across a lot of our services. So when I say, like, there's different ways to say it, clinical supervision, reflective practice, to me it's like, is somebody external who's got experience in personality, got expertise in personality disorder, and it's a space for reflection for staff. You know, how does the work impact on me? You know, how can my behaviour trigger people? All that sort of thing, just a space to reflect. And yeah, so we've got that mainstreamed across a lot of our services within the contract prices now. Alright, so moving on to low cost initiatives that we've sort of sponsored here in Westminster. So the next one, I wanted to show something. CUF, KUF, personality disorder training. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's low cost, high quality training, personality disorder awareness training. It was set up by its government initiative, I think Ministry of Justice, Department of Health, responding to the guidance about personality disorder no longer a diagnosis of exclusion. So a grand awareness programme that's been run throughout prisons, probation, health services. It's really intended to reach the widest possible audience, and it's really super high quality training. It has to be delivered by an expert by training and an expert by experience, somebody with lived experience. They both go on the Train the Trainers programme, but it's something that can be adopted by an organisation and rolled out internally very cheaply. So it's a standard set of slides, homework in between, clips on the computer. We've done lots of cohorts of it and consistently get great feedback about it. So I really recommend all organisations to look at that as a way of giving all workers a good grounding in personality disorder. A second set of sort of low-cost initiatives that we've really helped sponsor and broker are about therapeutic group work, sort of getting NHS services and approaches into homelessness organisations. So I suppose with group work, there's two advantages really. Well, firstly, there's the economies of scale. If you're doing something therapeutic with 8 people, you hit more people than one-to-one. But secondly, the powerfulness of, I'm not the only person who felt like other people feel like me. You know, other people feel like me. That can be so powerful, isn't it? So we've done that. We've done that in relation to a number of different themes now. So traditionally, sort of NHS sort of groups, so the things we've done in relation to are gambling, anger management, and at the moment we're looking at the IAPT programme, improved access to psychological therapies, talking therapies. That's the government's flagship programme that traditionally are delivered from specific programs, bringing them to day centres basically. And but traditionally the problem with those services is that they're over there at that venue, the travel, they're maybe too structured, maybe the referral process is too difficult in some way for your average sleeper, homeless person in a hostel, or maybe you have to be abstinent, not using any substances. That's often a deal breaker. So what we've done is sort of consistently, the sort of model that we've done is bring those services to the people, to the day centre, to the hostel, make a lighter version, maybe shorter, maybe not going into too much depth, taking out the complicated referral process, and critically, as long as you're there on the day and you're not drunk whatever on the day, that's okay. And that's really worked. We've got the numbers, been incredibly successful. So the anger management, really, John Connolly, I think he might appear somewhere else on PyLink. He's lead counsellor for an NHS homelessness counselling service, and he's really pushing the boundaries in terms of saying you can do therapeutic work with people who actually are still using. And this kind of work about the work that homelessness services do is preparing people for treatment, mainstream treatment, is very much echoed in this book, my second recommendation, Jay Levy, Pre-Treatment Guide for Homeless Outreach and Housing First. So when I read this is the first time I've seen the work of outreach, the kind of what it involves, written down. Otherwise it's this thing that's never really written down. I think it's just a super book. What it's describing to me just makes so much more sense than the sort of label like, oh yeah, we do housing related support, like supporting people hostels do housing related support. Well, that's not really it. It's kind of like putting people back together, people who've just had the most awful childhood life experiences and are quite in a difficult place, and helping them rebuild things. So his kind of five steps of pre-treatment are about, first you've got to promote safety, you've got to work on the relationships, that relationship is so important, and then creating a common language construction so that you can put into words with them that make sense for the person, for the client, about what's happened and then the way forward. And then helping, very much about the cycle of change model, helping to facilitate change and working around the what he calls ecological considerations, supporting the process of transition and adaptation. So I very much recommend this book, super book. Anyway, so back to the therapeutic group work that we've done. So we've done anger management, gambling groups, sort of changing up the NHS model of a CBT, very structured programme, to something actually is a bit more drop-in, a bit more flexible, a bit more response to the group who've arrived that day, because it's a drop-in model. That this is Connections at St Martin's that they've run, and we've got great outcomes, people going on to gambling treatment. And as an aside, I would say what we found is gambling is very high among our rough sleeping homelessness population. We've done a bit of work with a university student, Sharman et al. I think you'll find, if you Google it, there is a higher prevalence of problem gambling. It's very much worth screening, so I'd recommend all organisations to have a screening tool, and there's a neat one called the Canadian Problem Gambling Index that you can easily build in to your assessment framework. Guess my top tip there. Okay. At the moment, in terms of therapeutic group work, another thing we've got an iron in the fire at the moment is working with NAPAC. So they're the National Association of People Abused in Childhood. Here's a little thing about them. Fantastic website recommendation for an organisation. Brilliant website, great materials, all forms of abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and they've got a great free telephone helpline as well. I just think super organisation. So at the moment we're seeing if we can work with them to bring their support group into a hostel to try to work with survivors of childhood abuse. So again, we'll follow our winning format, a little bit lighter, a little bit more flexible, that pre-treatment work, preparing people for mainstream treatment. Okay, all right then. So what I'd say with all those things they've got in common is, there's got to be clinical governance. If you're doing something a bit different, a bit that's pushing the boundaries, you've got to have, somebody who thinks, no, this is a good idea, who's willing to kind of give their professional backing to it. So I've had those, but they're very much. All of these really have been pushing the boundaries, and some people say, oh no, is that the right thing to do? But what we do is we measure it and see what works, and it really has worked. We've got people off to gambling treatment, off to who are taking now from an open anger management group and now moving on to a closed group that goes that bit deeper. So I guess measuring is very important. Okay, so just consult my notes. Oh yeah, also along the lines of building bridges with these services is, sometimes you can't get your service user to that service. So, for example, in Westminster, we're actually really lucky to have a specialist personality disorder service, but actually you have to be very, very stable to get that, and our people just never don't tend to get to that level of stability. But what we have been able to do is set up a staff training kind of action learning set with the manager there, so that the expertise aren't locked up there, but no, because otherwise the expertise would be locked up there, but so that we can share some of that knowledge. So the action learning sets, the workers go up there, we've paid a little bit of money for that, but it's been incredibly beneficial. So I must say, of all the things that I've listed just now, they didn't all cost money. Occasionally you get the amazing situation where the NHS service actually is low on referrals and they want people, and that's actually what happened last recently with the IAP service. Talking therapists were saying, we're low on our referrals, we're not hitting our targets. We said, well, we've got the people. If you come to ours, we can get you good numbers. And we did. First session, stress and worry, 15 service users. The day centre clinicians in Martin prepped it well. They made a good plan for them. They were good partners, but delivered a great service that hopefully will put the breadcrumb trails back to treatment with them, back to their mainstream service. So it doesn't always cost anything. So but going on to my section of things that absolutely definitely don't cost anything are so firstly I'd say us so we're in the commissioning team, so we commission this range of services, and I think there's something that we can do about using our sort of influence as commissioners to sort of free our providers from maybe if they felt shackled by the supporting people regime. If they were thinking, I need a needs assessment, risk assessment support plan for everybody, signed by them, signed by us, nice and neat. We say to them, do what works, do what's meaningful for the person, make it individual, make it personalised. If it's a to-do list, if it's a timetable with pictures, make it what works, and in terms of the QAF framework as well, there's some great stuff in there, but not terribly pie. We say, come on, let's look at your service and make the action plan for service delivery, what best works for your service. And also in terms of using our funding creatively, maybe in the past there's been a reticence to move away from strict housing, our funding is for housing related support, key workers, that sort of thing. We say do what works. If you want to set up individual budgets, a number of our services are bringing in actually counselling through individual budgets or whichever way for service users who want to do that, bringing it on site because it feels more doable. So that's okay with us. So that kind of a bit more freedom, sort of saying to our services, do what works, creative, and experiment as well, measure, but experiment. Clinical governance, of course, is important, but don't feel shackled by supporting people. So second top tip for great free resources are, the stuff that's out there. There are some brilliant resources out there, absolutely free, that really, you've had a bad day, that really are just refreshing and give you new ideas. So, and it can be difficult work as well. So obviously PyLink's brilliant, but also the Emergence website. There's so much good stuff out there. The third thing I'd say is that networking doesn't cost anything. In Westminster we've got Personality Disorder Network, sort of cross-sector, super. We run it for free. People have to even bring their tea and coffee sometimes and water, but we all, what people walk away going, wow, that was amazing, because we just get a range of speakers. People come talk about their services, do little things among us. So it's free. It's the networking, chatting to people. This sort of incredibly real good, feel good factor about it. It's not a moan job at all. It's like, oh, I never knew about that. Or maybe we could do something together. It's really. It's been really successful, great turnouts. And then I also run something for our commission services as well, like a pie forum again, to think about, how can we take this forward as a group, as a sort of our specific commission pathway as well. And obviously more broadly, nationally, there's the Faculty for Homeless Health as well, who do mental health. I think there's a specialist interest group around this as well. So my fourth top tip for free resources or low cost is really the benefit for workers and also for service users of meeting up with peers, people in recovery. It's like John Connolly always said, the thing about people in recovery is they embody hope. They can tell there's not anything. And for the person who's still there, it's like, wow, how did you get that job? You were in a bad way and you did it. That is just amazing. Also, personally, for me, working in rough sleeping services, often it was a case of, the person would be sectioned or the person would go off to treatment. We never heard about them ever again. I hope they were all right, but actually, because we're still focusing on the other ones still on the street. So meeting peers, actually been there, done that, I was in hospital, and then this happened. it's just fantastic. And it, like I said, what John Connolly says, embodying hope. You know, there is a way for people. And what always amazes me is people do it in so many different ways. There's no one way. There's no one way to sort of get better, to recover. So many different journeys. Although I do very much like Groundswell's escape plan, which identified 7 common themes among people who get out of homelessness, and we turn things around, so I recommend that as well. And very much we're supporting employment for people with lived experience as well. One of the schemes we've supported over the last couple of years is the Buddy Scheme, run by English Churches Housing Group, and there's another clip of that somewhere else on PieLink. And we also support service user employment through our commissioning as well, saying, you know, if you want to get with us and deliver services, then what's your plan on form of service user employment? So it's really important for us. I think my last one on the 3 things is thinking about join up between services. So this is me talking as a kind of a commissioner. So we commission this range of services, and it's a current project of mine. What about the joins between them? How can we think about the emotional needs of people and psychologically informed moves between services, so that people don't have to tell their story again and do all the forms again, and when they arrive at the interview, the person knows what they like to be called, what they like to talk about. They know the thing maybe that's really difficult for them to talk about, and maybe the way to do it. So that's a piece of work that we're currently doing. And then I think that's part of a broader thing, that if you commission a range of different services, a range of different organisations, I think it's really important that you make a real team feeling about it. And we have this thing, let's say we're Team Westminster, you know, that we've got a culture that's about problem solving together. You know, we do training together, we promote trust between our services. So if it's a sideways move, you know, it doesn't feel like they're trying to offload that person on us. You know, that it's honest and it's open between services when sideways moves are going well, because the person's moving on to the next maybe stage of progression, or it hasn't worked out, maybe a fresh start would work. But yeah, really trying to promote a team approach between our services. And then our role as commissioners, I think, is attending to the interfaces with the external services. So thinking about the interfaces like with the statutory mental health services and other mental health resources, substance use services, sometimes doing that brokering, saying, well, I've got this range of services and, you know, maybe we could work in this way. But yeah, so part of PIE is I think it's important thinking about the external situation. I think Commission's got an important role there. So, in conclusion, I'm very much on a PIE journey myself. I say that to my services, you know. I think there are some bits of, my 4th recommendation, this one, my 4th recommendation. This is really good. So this is setting out the 5 parts of PIE. Psychologically informed services for homeless people, good practice guide. Still relevant, you know, it's a good few years old, but it's still very relevant. I think there are some easy bits for commissioners. Like for me, good quality training for all workers, good quality training on personality, good grounding personality disorder, things like the active listening, the cycles of change. That's the reflective practice I'd add to that. You know, those are the kind of things I'm looking for from services. And evaluation of outcomes as well. You know, that's not hard. You know, come on guys, I feel that's an easy part of the PIE stuff. I think the harder stuff, with the the 5 sets of the 5 areas of PIE, can be the framework, because I think the framework, because I think that organisations that don't have a strong leaning, it's all right if you've got a strong leaning to start with, but if you don't, I think sometimes it can feel like, it's a jungle, there's so many different approaches. Do we go for the trauma-informed care, or the CBT, the DBT, or psychoanalytical? All I can say is we've gone eclectic, we've supported different organisations, we've tried different things, just seeing what works really. They haven't all worked, but we've had a good hit out of a range of different approaches, because there's no one type of recipe, there's so many different issues in there. So I just encourage other commissioners to work with your providers, give things a go, see what works. Got to be clinical governance in there, but yeah, try it out, measure it, give it a go. We're on a journey together, perhaps.
So that was a great interview with Victoria, who's got all that energy and ideas about PIE, and I hope you find some of those ideas helpful and useful, and that you can maybe apply some of those if you're going on the PIE journey. Next, we're going to interview Sophie Bubis, our data analyst, with some ideas about the evaluation side of PI, which is one of the 5 or 6 main principles. Thank you. Hi, welcome everyone. It's Ray Middleton here from Fulfilling Lives, and today on the PI training we're really pleased to have Sophie Bubis here. So Sophie, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, hi Ray. My name's Sophie. I'm part of the Fulfilling Lives team, and my role is research and evaluation lead. So I'm responsible for evaluating, looking into, kind of finding out what's working within the whole Fulfilling Lives program, including the PI pilots.
Thanks, Sophie. So could you just say a little bit about what you're actually doing? We've piloted these 3 PIs, and could you just say a bit about what you're doing to evaluate them at the moment?
Yeah, so we want to see what the effect of the PI pilots were, whether they've made a difference. So we've been running focus groups and interviews with all the participants and managers at the 3 services where the pilots were run, and from those we're going to try and pull out what any themes or trends, what outcomes have people been found. We're not trying to predict what the PI might have achieved. We're letting the participants lead it, and from that we're going to try and see if we can pull out a framework of what we might expect in the future for PI as well.
That's really helpful, and so I look forward to seeing how that develops, and what we find. And then I think part of the idea of the PI is to reflect on what you find and then maybe change something, so it's a kind of ongoing process. So it'd be great to see that evaluation. So I think we've already seen about there's 5 or 6 points to a PI, so that's like the training and support for staff, but the support has a focus on reflective practice where you bring the staff together to reflect on the work they're doing, and that introduces a framework of some kind. It's not prescriptive about which framework, but a framework of some kind to help shape up the conversation and reflection. There's also a concentration on relationships and looking at improving the quality of relationships and focusing on that. And the final point is about thinking about the physical space and how that lends itself or doesn't towards being able to reflect with clients. And the last point is what we're talking about just now, which is about having different ways to generate some evidence for, if you introduce a PI, what differences it made. So I wondered if you had any kind of tips for people in terms of that evidence generating around those 5 or 6 points of a PI. How might people start to gather some evidence if they introduce that about what difference they've made?
Yeah, I think it fits very nicely with the same ethos of reflecting. So evaluation is just reflection. It's nothing big or fancy about it. It's just looking back and seeing, has anything changed? If you were introducing a PI, the best way would be to get some kind of baseline, to start with saying this is what it's like now, this is what people think now, and then to look at it again. And really I think the simplest way of doing this would be some kind of staff survey or team survey. It's always best to do anonymous and make it very clear that your answers aren't going to affect your position, because people are much more likely to be honest, and just to ask some really simple questions on those 5 areas. So, do you have the space to reflect? Is that space valuable? You might give the time over to reflect, but then it might not be worth it. Whereas after you've introduced the PI, it might change that. And just ask the same questions again at points in the future and see if you're seeing a change. I mean, that would be the simplest and easiest way of doing it, and I think will probably give you some very valuable information. And you might see that in some areas that you are seeing change and others aren't. So yes, we've got space for reflection, my communication with clients is improving, but we don't have a physical space, and then you can say, well, actually we're not picking up that, and it should be fairly simple to kind of implement that.
That's great, and I suppose that kind of I like the way you link that with the general idea of reflecting on what you find, but that's not a fixed point in time, because then you might make some changes based on what people say, and then you might try a bit more of the PI principles.
Absolutely.
And then you might reflect again in another 6 months and learn something else. So it's a kind of a relationship between the evidence gathering, having a reflection on what you found, and then maybe making some changes.
Yeah, it's action learning. So it's not that evaluation isn't it's not marking you or anything like that. It's not saying, oh, you've not achieved it, it's not worth it. It's about seeing what's working, what's not, and using that, as you say, to kind of loop back into what you're doing and go, oh, we've got that, seems to be working really well, but maybe that's not, or can we improve here? And And you can look at why it's not working. So okay, people are feeling really good about the reflective space, they're using the framework really well, but maybe we're not seeing that relationship with clients working so well. Why not? And then you can explore that further with your team and say, you know, what's going on, instead of going, it's not working, let's just not bother.
That sounds great, because one of the ideas is to think of Pi more of a journey than a switch that's on or off. So it might be, as you just described well there, 3 or 4 parts of that journey are going well, but there's one that we seem a bit stuck on, and then together you can reflect and think, I wonder why we're a bit stuck about this 0.4 or 5 of this Pi, and then think about how to move on that journey a bit better. And there might be some really good ideas from clients using the service, or staff, or from other places that just help you to move along and progress.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, absolutely worth involving clients in that evaluation process if you can, in asking them, have they noticed a change in how staff are interacting? Because, and again, really simple questions can give you a lot of information. It doesn't have to be sort of fancy or complicated survey or anything like that, just really basic questions.
So that's great. So thanks a lot, Sophie, for coming along and having a chat about evaluation. I really appreciate it. And it's given some food for thought for people to think, actually, evidence generating practice is important when you're trying something new and innovative, and it can be quite straightforward. It doesn't have to be massively complicated.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sophie.
Ray.
Hope you found part 4 of these 5 introduction to Pi training films helpful and useful. Do feel able to send the link to someone else if they're interested in Pi, and do give me a bit of feedback to let me know what you think of these Pi training films.